I'm just thanking you all for the opportunity to speak to you all. Just want to say I've just finished a 15-day trip throughout Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, and then Shenzhen and Dongguan, and now here at Hong Kong. I talked about many things. I gave 5 talks. I talked about an introduction to reinforcement learning. I talked about problems with supervised learning and how we can fix them, make it more continual. I talked about, what else did I talk about? I talked about decentralization and how it's important to learning algorithms. I've talked about learning from experience, which I really think is important, and reinforcement learning enables you to learn from experience. Learning from experience is the key to scalability. I'm trying to give you some of the punchlines from all these talks I've already given. Tomorrow, Martha and I go back to Canada. And so today's talk, I wanted to go back to high-level issues and talk about the impact of AI on society, and tell you some more of my general feelings about artificial intelligence and why it's important and why it's happening now. Let me try switching to the other microphone. So, before I get started though, let me just mention one thing. Open Mind Research Institute, the last one. This is a new institute, formed it last year. I founded it with Randy Gable and Joseph Modile. It's everywhere. It's a international event. The whole point is to hire young post-PhD researchers to do fundamental research in AI. And the current instantiation is based on the Alberta Plan for AI Research, which you might want to check out. But I'm hopeful that maybe some of you will want to apply to become an Open Mind Fellow in the next few years. So you can check that out on the internet. The first thing to note about artificial intelligence research is just incredibly ambitious. The idea, of course, is to understand intelligence well enough to create beings of greater intelligence than current people. So this is a profound intellectual milestone. It will change everything. It will enrich our economies, challenge our societies. It will be unprecedented and transformational, but also a continuation of trends that are really thousands of years old. Unprecedented and transformational, but also a continuation of trends. I mean, the trend is that we've always created tools and then been changed by our tools. It's what humans do. This next step is a big step, and it's where we understand ourselves, how we work. Now we can make ourselves work better. And I like to say, this is a quest grand and glorious and quintessentially human. This is not an alien technology. This is understanding ourselves. So, some other general remarks about my perspective is that the creation of superintelligent agents and superintelligent augmented people is just going to be good. It's going to be an unalloyed good for the world. It'll make us more productive. It'll help us understand ourselves. Maybe it can even help with the tensions in the world if we understand ourselves better and each other better. Other big point that I can't go through thoroughly, but I just need to mention it for you guys to know where I stand. I think the path to intelligent agents runs through reinforcement learning. You guys have a sense of that. Many of you, I had just signed some of my books on reinforcement learning. And but that's really, I think, quite different from the current most popular bandwagon about generative AI and large language models. That's going to be good work. I mean, it is good work, obviously, but I don't think it's the path to full AI. Next big point. The biggest bottleneck to this ambitious AI is inadequate deep learning methods. Now, this is a little bit contrarian because you may be thinking that's the one thing that we know we have deep learning and it just solves so much. But I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. And in fact, it's what's holding us back, is that deep learning methods are inadequate. They're too narrowly explored. We need new, better methods. And I'm going to give just a taste of that when I talk about some work we did that was recently published in Nature. Fourth big point, the greatest impacts and advances in AI are still to come. We still have to figure things out. If AI is a race, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. More basic things to do over the next few decades. Okay, so I said I'd give you a taste of this work in Nature where we show inadequacy of deep learning methods. So this is the taste, this one slide. And we showed loss of plasticity. Plasticity just means the ability to learn, and loss of plasticity means loss of the ability to learn. And this is what happens in deep learning. If you ask it to keep learning, it learns for a while, and then it loses the ability to learn further. It just grounds to a halt. And this is true in all kinds of deep learning, supervised learning, like recognizing pictures, and it happens in reinforcement learning. It happens naturally in reinforcement learning because reinforcement learning likes to continue to learn. Even as you improve your policy, your value function has to be learned, and it's a changing value function because the policy is changing. So this is an example of that. We're doing ant locomotion. So this is what's called an ant in Mujoko, even though it's only got 4 legs. It's got 4 legs with 2 joints in each leg. These are the joints shown here. And you have to learn how to control those joints to cause the ant to move forward as rapidly as possible. So you're rewarded for your degree of forward motion. So it looks a little bit like this. Here's an ant that's already learned how to walk really well, and you see it can move forward pretty fast. We're resetting it from the beginning. So that's how ant locomotion looks like. And then over on the right, we see a learning curve. So this is time here, a number of time steps. And on the y-axis, we have the reward per episode. There's a period of time during which you can move forward before we reset it. We measure how much reward you get in each episode. So that's a measure of how well you've learned to walk rapidly. And if we look at a standard learning method, like PPO, proximal policy optimization, I think it stands for, and you get rapid learning, and you get up to a high level, and if you stopped at this level, you would be happy. But life doesn't stop. We go on. We learn as things change. And if you take the standard algorithm and you continue to learn, nothing changes at all, just continue the algorithm, you'll find that the performance falls and falls, so you're worse than where you started, and really you can't walk well at all. This is what it looks like. And that's kind of all that ever is, unlike what we saw before, rapid motion. Okay, so the yellow line this is standard PPO. If we tune the algorithms for this particular situation, you can do better, and you can reach a higher level of performance for a little bit longer, but in the end, you get the same effect. Decreasing performance, and you go negative because you get penalties for slipping and falling in certain ways. Okay, so this is the phenomena of loss of plasticity, and so this happens with almost all of the standard deep learning methods. It happens in supervised learning, it happens in reinforcement learning, as I'm showing you. If you add different activation functions, it happens. If you do different algorithms, like if you add atom, it's actually worse. But there are a couple things that help. And one is L2 regularization, which is just adding a penalty term to the optimization function for the square of the weights. So it encourages weights that are near 0. And if you do that, you reach a level and you don't decrease. that keeps you able to be plastic and able to maintain your performance. And if you do a slightly more advanced thing, this is our new algorithm, continual backpropagation, which is essentially just like backpropagation. You're following the gradient on every step. But in addition, you take a small, tiny fraction, really, of units, and you rank all the units by their degree of contribution to the network. It turns out that with backprop, normally many of the units, like half or more, end up having a very little contribution. So anyway, you take some of the least used units and you reinitialize them. You reinitialize them to small random weights and zero outgoing weights. And as long as you do this, you can keep improving well over the 50 million time steps that we ran here. This is a really long run. So that's a good example of there's much more to be done. Deep learning is not the final algorithm. It's a starting place. Even continual backpropagation, we don't feel is the last step. There's more to be done. Okay, moving right along to another perspective. We can ask, why is AI happening now? And I think the basic reason is like Moore's law. The fact that computer power per dollar is increasing exponentially. This creates a big persistent pressure to understand the algorithms. So what you see in this graph, I'm sure you've seen this kind of graph before. We have the years along the bottom, and on the y-axis we have the computer power, and each data point is a particular computer. At some point in time, in the 65, maybe there was a particular computer, a strong one of that day, and it had a certain power. And more recent computers have higher power. And I don't have the most latest data points plotted on here, but they do very much approximately follow this line. Now, I want you to notice the y-axis is a log scale. So each one of these big divisions is a factor of 10,000. Is that right? No, it's 5 orders of magnitude. It's a factor of 100,000. So this time period, we have crossed many, many orders of magnitude, at least like 20 till now. So this is an amazing trend, and it's just been happening consistently. You can't see the world wars in this graph, really. And it shows every sign of continuing into the foreseeable future. And so this is happening now in all the times of the Earth. Right now, technology is reaching this exponential stage. And so we strongly feel that this explains why AI is happening now, why it will continue over the next decades. Even though I don't think we're currently on exactly the strongest path to AI, whatever it is, we will continue along it. We will be on it. And over the next, say, 15 years, we have a good chance at AI. So these are my public estimates. My public estimates is that by 2040, we have 50-50 chance of understanding intelligence in a general sense and being able to create strong AI. It's a bit of an arbitrary criterion, but so is the estimate. It could happen, only 50-50 by 2040. I would say 1 chance in 4, 25% chance by 2030. And of course, maybe a 10% chance that we never get there at all, most likely because we blow ourselves up. So I think inevitably what we're talking about is the ascent to a stronger form of humanity based on machine intelligence. And I see it as a continuation of where we've been going. And this has been evident for many decades, really, for at least 3 or 4 decades. And the person who spoke most cogently and wisely about it, I found the one who influenced my views is this fellow, Hans Moravec. He wrote a couple of these two books, 1988, 1998, and it's basically about the progress in AI and the ascent to superhuman intelligence and how to think about it. So these are his words. I'd like to just say them, quote them to you. His words on the ascent from man to artificial intelligence. He says, barring cataclysms, I consider the development of intelligent machines a near-term inevitability. Rather quickly, they could displace us from existence. And then he says, I am not as alarmed as many, since I consider these future machines our progeny, mind children, built in our image and likeness, ourselves in more potent form. They will embody humanity's best hope for a long-term future, and it behooves us to give them every advantage and to bow out when we can no longer contribute, much like all parents do. Give every advantage to their children. I'm talking now, not Hans Moravec. And then bow out when we can no longer contribute. Okay, so continuing on this theme, I want to say AI is not a new and alien technology. It's one of the oldest of human strivings. For thousands of years, philosophers and ordinary people have sought to understand themselves, to understand human intelligence. So, like we look at Western philosophers, almost every one of them, a major part of their philosophy was a philosophy of mind. So these, I'm going to just quote from them, and these first two are the titles of their books. John Locke wrote an essay concerning human understanding, focusing on the mind. Immanuel Kant wrote The Critique of Pure Reason. And René Descartes famously said, I think, therefore I am. Moving beyond the philosophers, we just look at scientists and ordinary people who've always been fascinated by our inner workings, from physiologists like Fechner and Ebbinghaus, through psychologists, Pavlov and Thorndike and Skinner and Tolman, different kind of psychologists, child psychologists, cognitive psychologists, Jean Piaget, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Timothy Leary, always trying to understand the mind, trying to make the mind work better in his own psychedelic ways. Ray Kurzweil is one of our modern prophets of artificial intelligence. So people have always been fascinated by their inner workings. How do their minds work? How do minds work? How can we make them work better? I think this is a grand quest. It's not just like narcissists, people looking at themselves. They like to understand themselves because they're focused on themselves. But this quote from Ray Kurzweil, intelligence is the most powerful phenomenon in the universe. We're not focused on ourselves just because we love ourselves. We're focused on this phenomenon of intelligence because it's very, very powerful. It will determine, I believe, how the universe will evolve. More, or in a similar sense in which, like the force of gravity has determined the way the universe is, determined the formation of the stars and the supernova that led to the elements and the planets. So intelligence, unlike supernova, intelligence is only a few 100,000 years old. It's a tiny baby. It's an infant. Give us 1 billion years. Intelligence will be having an effect, a large visible effect, probably, on the universe. Maybe we'll move stars around. Maybe we'll make Dyson spheres around them. Intelligence, purpose, and the understanding that goes with it is, I think, quite well understood as the most powerful phenomenon in the universe. So to understand it is the holy grail of science and the humanities, a great and glorious prize. But can we define it? What is it? What is it? Do we know what we're talking about? Well, I think we do, although we have, like any word, definitions are cheap. You can define things, different people can define things in different ways. A single word can have multiple meanings. So we have to strive for a meaning that lives up to this potential power. So let's look at it historically. Alan Turing, founding father of computing science, he roughly defined intelligence as behaving like a person. This is the Turing test. He never called it the Turing test. If you read his paper carefully, he never really proposed this as a definition of intelligence. But modern times has interpreted his words as defining intelligence as solving the Turing test. That's one understanding of what intelligence is. One that I don't myself particularly care for. If you look in the dictionary, just ordinary dictionary, like the one on my Macintosh, on my Mac, it will say the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. Pretty good definition, actually. But shouldn't we have an AI researcher tell us what he means by intelligence? Well, sometimes in AI we say we don't have a good definition, but I think we do. I think it's important to have a definition of your subject matter if you're going to make progress studying it. So you can find one, actually. This is the definition. Oh, no, that's the next one. This is a psychologist. This is a psychologist, William James, the founding father of psychology, 1890. He's defined intelligence as attaining consistent ends by variable means. Changing what you do in order to get the result you want. And this is the essence of having a goal. Keep moving around, changing things until you get what you want. And here is the AI researcher. This is John McCarthy, more or less the founding father, one of the founding fathers, and incidentally the one who coined the phrase artificial intelligence. He defined intelligence as the computational part of the ability to achieve goals. So these last two definitions are about goals. Intelligence is the ability to achieve goals. And I like the way McCarthy expresses it as the computational part of that ability. It's not, it means you're not able to achieve goals because you're strong or because you can see in the dark. You can achieve goals because of your computations. I like that definition, but having thought about this for a while, I have come up with my own definition. Okay, so my definition is that intelligence is the ability to achieve goals by adapting behavior. The ability to achieve goals by adapting behavior. I like this definition. One reason I like it is because it's short. I don't say it has to be the computational part, but I do say it has to be done by adapting your behavior. So when you change the way you behave, that's some computation has caused you to choose differently. We're not achieving our goals by being strong, by having actions that are very strong ones. It's by adjusting our behavior. So implicit in this is that it has to be a computational ability. And then the real focus is on the ability to achieve goals. I think that's what intelligence is and purpose is. I also think it's a kind of real-time signal process. We're sitting here, we're all taking in information through our eyes and our ears, and I'm generating new words and actions. You are politely sitting still, which is another kind of action. Anyway, if you think of a person playing the piano or playing tennis or doing almost anything, we are processing signals and using and picking actions, and that's really what an animal and what an intelligent agent is. So behavior is the agent side of that interaction, right? The actions we generate is our behavior, and the world will generate the sensory input. So that's what, when I say adaptive behavior, I mean adapting the mapping from your input to your output. And goals are outcomes that are achieved despite variations of the world. You know, if you're trying to catch a ball, you will move your hand to different places based on what you see, and despite those variations in the world. If you're trying to win a Nobel Prize, you will adjust to what you find in your research outcomes to try to find something that's important. If you're trying to get a degree in computing science, you will go to classes and learn from that and adjust to what you're told to try to achieve your goal. Now, goal is also, like, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take this definition and break it down. Ability, I trust you to know what I mean by that. I've talked a lot about adapting behavior and what that means. The one missing word is goals. What do we mean by goals? It's just an informal word. What can we mean more specifically? So there are perhaps numerous ways to do this, but the one I like, the one that reinforcement learning uses, we hypothesize that all goals can be thought of as maximizing a scalar input signal, which we call reward. And that itself is a challenging hypothesis. We call it the reward hypothesis, that all of our goals, grand or small, can be thought of as just trying to maximize a signal that we receive. It's in our brain. The signal is calculated by a special part of our brain called the hypothalamus, and that our goals can be thought of as maximizing that. So it would have to do with obviously pains and pleasures and comforts and other things. Now I want to go in that direction to think about reward and ask this question, which is really, I think, central to the social impact of AI. And the question is there just one goal, or does each have its own goal? Each intelligent agent have its own goal. So in reinforcement learning, it's clear. Each intelligent agent has its own goal. It has its own signal that corresponds to its pains and its pleasures. And if you look in nature, each animal, I think, pretty obviously has its own pains and pleasures. If an animal injures its leg, it causes it pain. It doesn't cause another animal pain in the same way. The pains and pleasures are their own. In AI and in nature, different agents have different goals. This is one of those things that's just kind of obvious, and I don't even know how to argue it. But it's different from thinking that we're working together and we all have the same goal. It's saying, no, the primary way to understand what's happening is we each have our own goals. So if you think about our societies and our economies, I actually think they work best when different people have different goals, different abilities. You can specialize in what you're good at and work for what you want and not deprive other people of what they want. So our economies, I think, don't really rely on people having a shared goal or a common purpose. Maybe this is controversial, but in some sense, I think it's obvious. It's best when people have different abilities and are working towards different things. Then they can make trades and exchanges. So I want to give a name to this. I think a good name for it is just decentralization. So when you have many agents, each pursuing their own goal, then it's decentralized. Each one is achieving their own goal. They can interact with each other. And when they interact with each other, and to their mutual benefit, this I'm going to call cooperation. So I want to riff on this for a while, this decentralized cooperation and its benefits. So I think the key thing is that agents can live in peace, even when they all want different things. I think this is maybe the best way to live in peace, is when we want different things. And we can cooperate in this decentralized way. In fact, I think that the special thing about humans, is that we, as an animal, we cooperate more than any other animal.
And that cooperation is facilitated by our unique capabilities for language and for the creation of money. These are the key things that enable us to cooperate. We can talk to each other and make a deal. I will pay you $20 if you mow my lawn, or if you do something else. So humanity's greatest successes are that we cooperate, or come from our cooperation. So our economies, I think, are our greatest successes. They have made technology, they have made education, they've made culture. So our economies, our markets, our governments are our cooperations. And also our greatest failures are failures to cooperate. What is war? But failure to have an interaction that's to mutual benefit. Each side is trying to do something to their benefit at the expense of the other. What is theft? Theft is a failure to cooperate. Corruption is a failure to cooperate. So this idea of decentralized cooperation is an alternative to the idea that, oh, we all want the same thing. We have a common purpose. And in my view, it's more elegant, it's more sustainable and robust, more adaptive, more flexible. And it's what we are doing. Basically, it's what humans are doing in our economies, in our markets, and our governments. So I think humans are better at cooperation than any other animal, but it's also true that we are still terrible at it. We still have wars where we fail to cooperate. We still have theft and corruption and fraud. So isn't this interesting? I think it's just a powerful lens with which to view everything. Our greatest successes and our greatest failures have to do with cooperation. So we struggle to cooperate, and it's not easy. It's not always possible. It takes two trustworthy agents to cooperate. And there are always some people, some agents, who will benefit from not cooperating. You know, the thieves, the con men, the weapons manufacturers, the dictators. Cooperation needs institutions to facilitate it. It needs institutions to punish the cheaters and to seek out and catch the thieves, the fraudsters, the extortionists. And a centralized authority can help cooperation, at least in the short term. So it's possible that it can help. It's also possible that it can poison cooperation in the long run. So we have an authoritarian government or a sclerotic government, one that becomes just too bureaucratic and extracts value from the economy without returning value. So really, the contrast I'm trying to develop is between centralized control, where we all agree on some mission that everyone has to subvert their own goals to, or decentralized. It's the opposite of decentralized cooperation. These two have worked against each other throughout time. So now let's bring it back to AI. There are many calls for centralized control of AI in today's world. There's talk about controlling the AI's goals. What is the alignment problem? How can you change the AI's goals to align with what's supposed to be humanity's goals, some humanity common goal? There are calls for pausing or stopping AI research. There are calls to limit the power of an AI computer. There are calls to ensure safety. Safety is always what centralized control couches its recommendations in the language of safety and care. But it really means centralized control. Or for disclosing that, you know, what's an AI, what's a person. These are all calls for centralized control of AI. And there are also calls for centralized control of people, and they're eerily similar. There are calls to control speech, to control what the media can say. There are calls to control what countries can trade with what others, and employment, for controlling the financial system, for economic sanctions against one country or another. I'm sure we're all aware about the sanctions applied to China by the US, and that war that has been existing and may be heating up. Anyway, the arguments for centralized control in both cases, whether for control of AI or control of people, It's eerily similar, isn't it? They're all based in fear. They talk about the other side. The other side is the enemy, and they're demonized, and they're claimed to be dangerous, just like claim the AI is going to try to kill us all, or that the other country is trying to blow us up. So they're all about demonizing the other and claiming that the other can't be trusted. I think we have to fight against this. Now, I think I have one more slide before concluding. And I just snuck this in. This is the last of the 12 steps of the Alberta Plan for AI research. The last step is about the many ways in which AIs and people could work together. And I think it adds just a little bit more color to what cooperation between AIs or between people and AIs might look like. So AIs and people working together. One integration is that it can be tight. So like a smart prosthetic. You've lost an arm, you put on a mechanical arm, and it helps you. But then you have to control it, and you have to tell it what to do, and you have to live with it. Or you might have another lobe to your brain that can access Google or the internet generally, and increase your memory. You could have richer sense organs, and all created by technology. So this is what we might think of as tight integration between a person and an AI working together. Tight integration. A slightly looser integration would be like if you have an assistant, like a Siri or an Alexa, someone that you speak to, and they give you information. So they're like a person, but they're working for you and answering your questions. And then the loosest integration, if you had free AIs, taking their full proper place in our society, in our economy. If they were full free AIs, they would be allowed to pursue their own goals, whatever they might be, whether it's getting more oil for their joints, or maybe reproducing themselves, or buying more computer power so they can be better. Yeah. So we is I guess. I'm optimistic that these things can be done, that you can have integration all the way up to free AIs to everyone's mutual benefit. But we all should take responsibility. This will not necessarily happen automatically. We should take responsibility and play a part in making this more likely and more widespread. Okay, so now to conclude, I believe that human flourishing comes from decentralized cooperation, as in our markets. And I believe humans are great at cooperation, but also terrible at it. And it's not always possible, but it's the source of all that's good in the world. All of our technology, all of our buildings, all of our culture comes from decentralized cooperation. Now, if we look with open eyes, I think it's easy to see who is working for decentralized cooperation and who is working for centralized control. Those who are calling for mistrust, non-cooperation, centralized control, and we should resist those calls. We should look to find ways of cooperating peacefully rather than trying to control each other. And that this is a useful lens with which to view all calls for human and AI interaction. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks for Professor's great talk. So now we can have some time to ask some questions from the audience. Okay, so yeah, if you have any question, please raise your hand so we can pass the microphone.
Thank you, Rich. You talked about the work published in the Nature, right, this year, and continued BP. And in that context, are you seeing that by overcoming the limitation of currently doing neural network training, we can actually do RL much, much better, right? And that is, in your view, required, right, for reaching let's say 20, 40, like 50%, chance of getting to human level AI. Is that what is being said here? That connection, yes.
Thank you, June, for warming things up by asking the first question. This is my good friend June Luo. And you're right. I do believe that fixing the problems with deep learning so that we are capable of learning continually is critical for reinforcement learning. But it's not just for reinforcement learning. Like even our standard large language models have a major problem of learning continually. When more data becomes available, more news articles, they generally have to start over from scratch to incorporate new information. They can't just keep learning from the previous network. They have to throw away the old network and make a new one from scratch. It's a challenging problem. Continual learning is a big deal. Of course, I'm thinking I want to do reinforcement learning. I want to learn from trial and error. I want to have a genuinely the capability of doing something superhuman rather than learning always from humans and trying to mimic humans. And for that, we need to go beyond mimic learning, beyond generative AI.
Okay.
Another question
great.
here?
Yeah.
Hello, thank you. You mentioned that human cooperate with money, and you mentioned that AI agents should have different goals to decentralize that. But we can see human cooperates based on the share the goal to make more money. But
So we maybe all want more money, but that is not that we share a goal. It's more like our goals are symmetrical. Like we all want food, but you want your food, you want food that you'll eat, and I want food that I will eat. So they're not the same goal. They're actually almost opposites.
Yeah.
They're just symmetrical. So the same would be true for money.
So my idea is that maybe the AI agents should get multiple goals. They have their own goals to pursue, and all of the agents has a shared goals to make more money, so that they can cooperate better.
So my point is that we don't have to share goals in order to cooperate. In fact, it's better if we have different goals. The famous examples, I have apples, you have bananas. If the fact that we value them differently and now allows us to trade. I can give you some of my apples in exchange for your bananas, and we both are better off. It's because we value bananas and apples differently. So shared goals I don't think it's the path to cooperation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I hope we will have many questions. So please just be patient, and your time will come. I didn't run on very long today, so we have plenty of time to discuss if you have interesting questions. And I won't not come back here for at least a year. So this is our chance to share some ideas. Go ahead.
Thank you, Richard, very much for the talk. I'm just, because you mentioned there's going to be an interaction between multiple humans and multiple agents. So I would be interested in what is our objective of solving this system? I can think about there are certain solution concepts, like certain equilibria. And also we might be interested in the dynamics of how certain outcomes are formed and what is the process. So I would be interested if in the context of these multiple agents and AI and human, what is our objective?
So notice what you're doing. You are presuming that the multiple agents are interacting in order to achieve some overall goal.
Yes.
Yeah, you're presuming that.
Assuming rationality. Or some certain
So I don't think they are. I think each one just has its own goal, and then they start interacting. And so cooperation makes sense. They can interact, and each to their mutual benefit. You don't need a theory about an overall purpose. You just have their individual purposes is causing the interaction. Yeah, and so it's one of those things that the greatest insights, I think, are things that are obvious and then that we can't see. We very often cannot see the most obvious and important things. And I think this borders on one of those. So, for example, let me just riff on this a little bit. When I grew up, there was no reinforcement learning. And yet, if you knew something about psychology as I did, it was obvious that something like reinforcement learning was important for engineering, for machine learning, for AI. But there was no such thing. And so it was obvious that there should be, but there wasn't. So there was this obvious thing that no one could see. And I really didn't, well, I could see it, but I was just a kid. And it took others to point it out to me that this was a big deal. And then I took it a little further. We have to see what's obvious. So I think it's obvious that our technological success, the success of our societies, comes from each one having its own goal. Like, I'm trying to feed my family, and the other guy is trying to feed his family, and together we interact to our mutual benefit. And we're not trying to do anything for the globally. We're not trying to do anything for the society, really. We're just trying to each do our things. And a successful society is where all the agents do well. It's not a society that achieves something beyond them. So, I know we all love the idea that there are some purpose beyond ourselves. I just want you to acknowledge that it's not needed. That you can understand our society perfectly well without any larger goals, just our individual goals. I think it's great that we can all achieve our individual goals really well, but it doesn't have to be directed towards some larger purpose. Yeah, it's somewhat challenging to think through. You want to follow up?
So what's the goals of the AI then?
What's the goal of the AI is to maximize its reward. And each artificial intelligence agent has its own reward. Yeah, and it can be anything. Yeah. It really can be anything. And so the point is that the AI agents could have a diverse set of goals. One of them could want to make paper clips. Another one might want to, get more computer power. Another one might want to make more copies of itself. And this is not a disaster scenario. Through interaction, and the advantages of cooperation, each can achieve its goal to some extent, and everyone is at peace. You can have peace without having aligned goals. The call for alignment, I think, is a call for controlling the goals that the AIs are allowed to have. And this is a very aggressive thing to do, to say the AIs can only have certain goals. Well, what if someone tries to make an AI that has a different goal? They have to be stopped. It's very aggressive to say you're going to control all of the AIs in the world, or that you will control all the AI research in the world. And so I'm calling for peace. I'm saying we don't have to control each other, just so we don't have to control people. People can have different goals, and we can live at peace. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Rich.
Hi, Rich. Thank you for the talk. While I find cooperation great, and I agree with you, I think when you design a system, you usually try to look over some sort of global reward, right? Like, what is the overall output of a society might be, rather than let's look at the individual level, and if each one of them achieves the reward. And I think when it comes to the global reward, you kind of might need this competition. And I think throughout history, this is kind of how humans have worked out a little bit, which sometimes might come at the cost of another agent. So so it's not necessarily a very rigid question, but it's more like an open-ended opinion on this. I just want to hear your opinion. But don't you think there needs to be some sort of competition among the agents, right? For example, throughout history, let's say between the US and the Soviet Union, there was the race to the space. And this drove an incredible progress towards science. And this is something that maybe I might not be able to talk about the negatives that it might have brought out. But in general, I think as a society, everyone might not necessarily look only for, they might not necessarily look at the other person's reward, and that sometimes we might just prioritize ourselves over the other agent's reward and maximize that instead, and not necessarily care about what might impact have, which I feel like disagrees a little bit with cooperation. What do you think is your perspective on how the agents should interact in terms of competition?
So it's a good question. Thank you for that. Competition. Is competition the opposite of cooperation? I'm thinking not. I'm thinking control is the opposite of cooperation. Competition is actually a very important form of cooperation. In order to compete for example, to play Go with another person, it's an extraordinarily cooperative activity. You have to agree to take turns, have to agree what the rules are, you have to agree to have a certain kind of outcome being valuable. And, cheating is not a good outcome. And similarly, so cooperation is the way we find the best way to do something. And after we found the best way, if there's a clear outcome, then we can all do the better way. So cooperation is not the opposite of cooperation. And war, sometimes we call war like the competition between nations, but I would distinguish between a competition like we all try to make the best 5G network and we'll see who wins, who will sell more in the marketplace. That's a good cooperation, a good competition. It's finding the best way to do something. Whereas war is we just try to you fail to cooperate. You try to have outcomes that are determined by your desires and not the other person's desires. Yeah. What else did you mention? Competition. Nice to have a global goal, but my whole point is there is no global goal. And how would we agree on the global goal? If there's a global goal but there's no agreement on it, then really there isn't a global goal. There's just each is a form of alignment between the different goals. In order for each person to achieve their goals, there usually has to be working together, and the outcome has to be helpful to many. And of course, there are challenges like the cheaters and externalities. We work for cooperation. We work to have it that the interactions are to mutual benefit. And how are you going to agree on a global goal without violating someone's desires? We don't normally all agree. We don't naturally all agree. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, I guess the reason I said some sort of global reward was specifically because when in terms of AI, we design a system that is supposed to maximize usually something, right? So I feel like that's why.
Does this even make sense to say a global reward? The reward is by definition the goal of the system. There is no such thing for a society. I mean, there's just not just human society. What about all the animals? What about the dolphins and the chimpanzees? What about the lions and the gazelles?
Do you think the lions and the gazelles are going to agree on a global reward? The lion wants to eat the gazelles. The gazelles just want to eat their grass. You can't always have agreement about what the goals are. And you can't always have cooperation. We have to work towards cooperation. And as best we can.
Okay, because of a time limit, we only have like one more question. And we also have the offline discussion section like after the panel discussion. So you can keep your question over that time.
Thanks, Rich, for your inspiring talk. So just by knowing your definition of intelligence today, so you said its ability to achieve goals by adapting behavior. I think on the hinder side, it's naturally lead to your work on the continuous learning.
Yes.
I know you are champion for that. But today you give us a new idea of a corporation. So by the definition of your intelligence, cooperation is not, clearly showing in the definition of intelligence. So I'm wondering, are you working on some new framework of, incorporating your concept of cooperation into a more intelligent AI system? So could you give us some insight on that?
It's not a new algorithm. It's mainly a reaction to those that are calling for AI alignment with human values, as if there was such a thing. I consider that it's often using the language of safety. To be safe, we have to control them. They're bad. It's just like demonizing the other country and the other people, or it's like.
But do you think having cooperation will increase the intelligence? Is this a way towards the increase of AI intelligence?
No, I think it's separate. I think intelligence, if we are intelligent, we realize that this is where peaceful interactions come from. That it is almost always desirable to cooperate. Now, not always. The lions and the gazelles, maybe they cannot cooperate. Maybe it's very difficult for them to cooperate. But it is almost always the best solution. And we are much more capable. Our society is much more capable because we have been intelligent enough to cooperate. And I think that as we get AIs that maybe are smarter than we are, they will be more able to see that the way for them to win is to cooperate with each other and with us. Intelligence leads to the ability to cooperate.
Thanks.
Hi, Rich.
Good to see you.
I'm not sure if I'm the only somebody from social science background, and because what you talked about, it resonated a lot of what its theories are doing in social science. So, for example, human civilizations invented ways of punishment as a way of a rule, almost. For example, the idea of sovereignty, the idea of monopolization of violence, and in 20th century or even late 19th century, we see technological advancement enable massive destruction, where the rules, punishment. So punishment is something human civilization invented in accordance with monopolization of violence. There's a game there, right? There's a game of establishing mutual deterrence, all those social scientific theories about it. I wonder, what do you think about, it's, in one aspect, this is what civilizations invented, not necessarily, the path dependent, right? And also, this is one question. Another set of questions, I wonder.
I'll forget it. So let's deal with this first.
Okay.
And I can send it back to you as the more experienced social scientist. But wouldn't you agree that the punishment that our societies come up with, its point, the reason we punish is to enable a better cooperation. We punish the thief who's breaking the idea that it would be beneficial to both parties. And so we establish punishments in order to make cooperation work better.
Right. And another set of questions that's helpful. And then another is about in economics, at least in microeconomics, one of the fundamental, so the methodological principle is called the methodological individualism. Methodological individualism, where units of account all back to the agent, the single agent, right, the individual person. But there's I mean, they don't talk about shared goals. I mean, it's more other methods in social science, but.
Would you say economics
Yeah.
accepts the idea that all the actors have a variety of goals?
Right, and they have different preferences.
Different preferences.
But one.
And while we have you here, can you also validate the claim that economics accepts that it's good for the economy if you have a variety of participants with different skills and different preferences?
Right, that's basically free market theory, right?
Market theory, yeah. Good.
So that goes along with it. That I'm just trying to confirm. That goes along with it.
Good. Thank you.